You can wait outside." The words cut through the ambient hum of the conference room like glass. Heads turned. Silence followed. My fingers clenched the folder in my hands, 6 months of research inside, work that had saved the company millions. My voice barely rose above the clink of champagne glasses. "Excuse me." Renata, our marketing director, didn't even look at me. She waved her hand like I was a smudge on a window. "We're at capacity for the ceremony. You understand." I looked around. The room was spacious. Tables dressed in cream linen. Every chair taken by a familiar face, every colleague from my department, including Round, the intern who'd been here all of 3 weeks. The same intern who had presented my supply chain algorithm as her own in the last board meeting. Renata smiled. Cold. Sharp. "Why would we waste a seat on you? You're just an analyst." That moment froze in time. The missed promotions. The stolen ideas. The weekends sacrificed. My eyes moved to the projector screen Innovation Excellence Award. A title that should have been mine. "I see," I said quietly. I opened my laptop. "Check your email." A pause. Then the sound. Ping. 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 Notifications flooded their phones and laptops as I turned and walked out, closing the door behind me. Their murmurs of confusion and rising panic were the last thing I heard. Before I go on, ask yourself, have you ever been overlooked? Underestimated? Treated as disposable while someone else took credit for your work? If so, you'll understand what I did next. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't angry. It was precise. 3 years in the making. And it changed everything. My name is Belle Novak, and until that day, I was the senior data analyst at one of the country's fastest-growing logistics firms. I have an eidetic memory, a knack for finding patterns in chaos. My skills made me exceptional at solving problems and terrible at office politics. I believed hard work and innovation would speak for themselves. I was wrong. I grew up in a quiet town. My father ran the local library. My mother taught mathematics. They raised me to believe that merit always rose to the top. They were wrong, too. After earning dual master's degrees, I joined the company that seemed like a perfect fit, efficient, data-driven, progressive. My first year was flawless. I designed an inventory tracking system that reduced errors by 37%. I developed predictive models that optimized shipping for dozens of clients. I caught a critical bug in our flagship software that could have cost the company its largest account. I followed every protocol. I documented everything. And still, it began to unravel in my second year, when Dominic arrived. Dominic, the new department head. He was praised for turning teams around. What they didn't mention was his real talent, taking credit for everything and blaming others for failure. The first time it happened, I convinced myself it was a miscommunication. I had developed an algorithm to forecast shipping delays using weather and port congestion data. I presented it to Dominic privately. 2 weeks later, he presented my work to the executives. No credit. No mention of me. I was stunned, but stayed silent. I thought if I just kept proving myself, I'd rise anyway. That was the second mistake. It got worse. He began using my models, reshuffling my reports, having others, including interns, present them as their own. My name was quietly erased from project after project. And when I finally confronted him, "Belle, you're not a team player. You lack vision. That's why you're where you are." I went home that night and stared at the walls for hours. I thought of my parents, their voices in my head. Work hard. Stay honest. People will notice. People noticed, all right. They noticed my work. And they stole it. That night, I began a project. Not out of anger, but clarity. They thought I was quiet, that I was weak. What they didn't realize is that I don't forget anything. And I don't leave loose ends. Over the next 2 years, I built something quietly. A system. A truth machine. I copied every email, archived every project file, every time-stamped proof of concept. I saved audio clips of meetings. I documented edits, versions, and code strings. I watched as Dominic won promotion after promotion. As Ren became the poster child for innovation. I said nothing, because I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was constructing their collapse. The night before the awards ceremony, I activated the system. Every board member, every executive, every senior client received a custom email. Data attached. Project timelines. Access logs. Meeting transcripts. Every lie. Every theft. Every name. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't threaten. I simply showed the truth. As I walked away from that conference room, the emails were already being opened. Phones buzzing. Screens flashing. By morning, Dominic was gone. By the end of the week, HR was conducting a full audit. Rain submitted her resignation. Ranata, the one who told me to wait outside, was reassigned to a non-strategic division. I didn't go back. I didn't need to. You see, revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, methodical. A blade so sharp it doesn't draw blood until it's too late to stop the bleeding. They called it a scandal. I called it justice. But here's the bittersweet part. It didn't make me happy. I lost years trying to prove I was worth something to people who were never going to see me. I walked away with no applause. No public redemption. Just peace and the kind of clarity you earn the hard way. Sometimes, the cost of revenge isn't just theirs. It's yours too. But if I had to do it again, I would. Because sometimes silence isn't strength. Sometimes it's preparation. And when the time comes to speak, let the truth be louder than anything else. I pored over the upgrades as if my life depended on them, nights blending into early mornings with the glow of my laptop for company. Each week, I added new efficiency modules to the framework, polishing the edges that had been ignored in the rush of corporate politics. Every night when I came home, my wife, Mara, would stare at me with worried eyes. "You haven't slept," she chided softly one evening, touching the purple circles under my eyes. "I can't stop thinking about it," I admitted. If only they'd just listen. This could change everything for our family. But she only shook her head, and for the first time I saw fear instead of pride. Family conflict had quietly crept in. Mara reminded me our son had a soccer match the next day, and I'd be too tired to even watch. Guilt twisted my gut. I was sacrificing our time together to avenge a company slight that no one else even knew about. Betrayal and broken trust had crept into our lives like a silent shadow. At work, I maintained my usual facade. Whenever Dominic passed my desk, I plastered on a polite smile and nodded at his hollow jokes about the new logistics plan. He had no idea I was pulling long hours on the same subject at home for our family's future. Word arrived that Ren's logistics improvement was already showing success in the East Coast shipping tests. Ren herself strutted around the office this morning, high-fiving Dominic. Her uncle was CEO, and somehow that made them both forget about me. Late that night, something unexpected happened. I received a private message on LinkedIn from a logistics director at Greymark Shipping, a competitor we had fought for years. He had heard rumors that I was wrestling with the old framework's flaws. We began an email exchange, careful and secret. He hinted that Greymark was looking for someone with insider knowledge of Comesta Solutions operations. The idea of leaving had never seriously occurred to me until now, but this was a lifeline. I realized it was an opportunity one couldn't ignore. A few weeks passed. Mara confronted me in bed one night. I could feel her anger simmering. "You're planning something, aren't you? You've been distant, working on that thing no one at work knows about," she said quietly. Her voice was a mixture of fear and frustration. I looked at her, my heart torn. "I've been writing my own proposal. For our freedom. We need to make a change." She bit her lip, tears forming. "Is it worth it? What if everything goes wrong? We could lose more than your job." Her words echoed my own fears. In January, I quietly resigned from Comesta. Dominic threw a smug farewell as I handed him the notice. His eyes held nothing but relief and maybe pity. I'd have to see that again at the next corporate event. Mara and I moved swiftly after that. By March, I was an official contractor for Greymark Shipping under an alias, using my years of research in secret. Their interest in my ideas was genuine, but more crucially, they needed someone who knew Comesta's vulnerabilities. It was a sick satisfaction that the tables had turned on them. Greymark scheduled a round of shipping trial runs with our new routes, integrating the enhancements I had developed. Within weeks, cost projections dropped by 30% and delivery times improved by 55%. Greymark quietly began rewriting contracts with Comesta's biggest clients, promising the new overhaul at a competitive price. Through covert channels, I passed anonymized reports to the Comesta board about missed revenue and frustrated clients, all pointing directly to flaws in the shelved plan that Ren had presented as her own. At the next executive meeting, whispers filled the boardroom as Greymark's moves became clear. Dominic stood up, rigid and sweating. "Ren, we've lost the Horus freight contract," he spat out. Ren's jaw tightened, her poise slipping. After the meeting, Ren stormed into Dominic's office. "Explain this," she demanded, holding the contracts. Dominic glanced at me, at Mara silently behind me. I had come with her to witness this confrontation. "I don't know," he lied, voice cracking. Ren's voice cracked with anger, accusing Dominic of sabotage. Meanwhile, the CEO, Mr. Cortana, pieced things together from the leaked reports. His face was thunderous. That evening he invited Dominic and Ren to a family dinner rather than a board meeting. At the dinner table, Sherry, Mr. Cortana's wife, bit her lip as Dominic tried to deflect blame. "I might have missed an anomaly," he admitted quietly. Ren glared at Dominic but said nothing, her eyes narrowing. Suddenly, I stood in the doorway of the dining room, my presence like a flame in the dark. They all turned. Dominic's face went white. Mara stood firmly by my side. I spoke clearly, not as an employee or an interloper, but as someone who knew exactly what had happened. I outlined how Greymark's new plan was truly mine, how I had improved every detail, and how Comesta's leadership had chosen nepotism over progress. Ren's face crumpled, Dominic's jaw dropped, the CEO's eyes narrowed like a hawk. Shock gave way to a rare silence. Mr. Cortana's voice trembled. "Is this the truth then?" he demanded of Dominic. Dominic stammered, and Ren just stared at her plate. Mara squeezed my hand from beside me. For a moment, I felt vindicated, but something else stirred within. Family conflict had just erupted, cousins against each other, a daughter-in-law facing her husband, trust shattered across the table. That night, Dominic left Comesta in disgrace. Ren's promotion was revoked, and she was sent to fix the mess, working under tight supervision. The CEO personally thanked me the next morning for exposing the flaws, even if inadvertently. But as I watched Mara and our son from our new home, thanks to Greymark's generous contract, I realized revenge had a hollow echo. The betrayal was exposed, trust may be reclaimed, but the cost, the broken family ties, the sleepless nights, the paranoia remained raw. I had won my revenge, but at what cost? In the end, I did show them what that philosophy would cost. But as I pulled my wife close, I wondered if any of it had been truly worth the wreckage of our old world. That would make the version they'd stolen look primitive by comparison. But this was just the beginning. I began cataloging every instance where my work had been appropriated. Every email, every timestamp, every version history and metadata trail. I compiled a digital archive, meticulous, irrefutable. But data alone wasn't enough. I needed voices. I reached out quietly to former colleagues who had disappeared under curious circumstances. Tamsin from product development. She had engineered a predictive freight model that was patent-worthy until her manager presented it first. She left the company within a month. Leo from client relations. His client retention strategy saved our biggest account until the VP paraded it as his own. Leo walked out silently. Each conversation peeled back a layer of rot. This wasn't just a one-off betrayal. It was a pattern. A system built on gutting innovation from the bottom up and polishing it for display at the top. People like Dominic weren't anomalies, they were rewarded. But something else came from those conversations, a network. A quiet collective of undervalued minds who had kept creating despite the silence. People like me, not built for applause, but for purpose. 3 months before the awards ceremony, I scheduled a private meeting with Gail Iverson, a venture capitalist with a reputation for investing in companies that reshaped industries from the ground up. I presented her my enhanced logistics framework, the one Comesta had stolen and botched. Alongside it was a full business plan. Gail scanned the data, then looked up, skeptical but intrigued. This could transform the entire sector. But why leave a secure position to start from scratch? Competition in this space is brutal. I smiled and slid the second presentation across the table. 7 profiles. Industry veterans. Each one a casualty of the same system. And every one of them had agreed to join me if I secured funding. Tamsin. Leo. Others whose names had been buried in the footnotes of someone else's career. Gail's expression changed. Now that's interesting. 2 weeks later, I had funding. 1 month after that, office space, leased under a holding company name. We filed preliminary patents. We drafted airtight NDAs and employment contracts. We began quiet outreach to clients, especially those who had voiced frustration with Comesta's lack of flexibility. Through strategic networking, I identified 5 major clients who were on the verge of pulling out. I scheduled discreet one-on-one meetings and walked them through our upcoming solution. Each of them said the same thing: if you launch this, we're in. All I needed now was a moment. The final act. The quarterly award ceremony provided the perfect stage. Word had spread that Rin, the CEO's niece, the golden intern who had plagiarized my work with Dominic's blessing, would be receiving the Innovation Excellence Award. I didn't flinch. I got dressed that morning with ritualistic care, slipping into a deep blue dress, quiet elegance, calculated calm. Not a scream for attention, just enough to remind them who they chose to overlook. I walked into the grand conference hall early, not because I expected to be included, but because I wanted them to see me. One last time. At the entrance, I stood still, observing. Colleagues filtered in, smiling, laughing, unaware. Dominic entered next, flanked by Rin. They both paused when they saw me. She looked past me. He offered a thin, brittle smile. I nodded politely. The same way prey might nod to a predator, seconds before the trap closes. Renata, the marketing director who once told me there was no space for me, chatted with the CFO, oblivious to the storm brewing just beyond the champagne flutes. I took my seat in the back, quietly. And then it began. The lights dimmed. A video montage played. Accomplishments, highlights, numbers, and smiles. Then came the moment. Please welcome this year's Innovation Excellence Award recipient, Rin Carlson. Applause. Flashing lights. She rose, confident, poised, took the stage, gave a carefully rehearsed speech about disruption, data, and the future. She even quoted one of my lines from a buried white paper. But the room wasn't clapping as hard as she expected, because everyone's inbox buzzed at once. A system-triggered email. From me. Subject line, the truth you applauded. In it, screenshots of original framework versions. Timestamped file logs, project histories, a side-by-side comparison of my work and Ren's copy, video clips, audio, quotes from Tamsin, Leo, and others. A final page, a press release. Introducing ArcLight Dynamics, innovation without exploitation. The story hit the press in 17 minutes. By the time Ren sat back down, the executives' faces had turned to stone. Dominic stood up mid-ceremony and walked out. Renata followed, making panicked calls. I walked up the aisle, past stunned faces and hollow stares. As I exited, I dropped 7 envelopes at the front desk. Resignations. Mine and the 7 others who had already joined me. Aftermath. Comesta bled talent that day. Then clients. Then investors. Within 6 months, their stock had dropped 48%. A year later, they sold the company piece by piece. Rain disappeared from the industry. Dominic was blacklisted. And me? ArcLight Dynamics launched with 5 enterprise clients on day 1. We built slowly, intentionally, and fairly. Our team thrived not because we were perfect, but because we trusted each other. But here's what no one saw. I didn't feel triumphant at first. I felt hollow. For months, I'd lived in a storm of betrayal and manipulation. Revenge was never about winning. It was about ending something that should never have begun. And it cost me. time, peace. Pieces of myself I can't get back. But would I do it again? Yes. Because in a world where the loudest voice usually wins, sometimes the quiet one must speak last. And when it does, it should echo. Renata, the marketing director who had once dismissed operations staff like we were invisible, was checking the seating chart when her eyes landed on me. For a brief second, her surprise flickered, and then it returned, that same irritated look from years ago. You can wait outside, she snapped. 3 years of quiet cruelty sharpened in that moment. Her words weren't just rude. They were dismissive, dehumanizing. I caught Ren's smirk out of the corner of my eye, smug, confident, untouchable. But they had no idea. No idea what I had sent. No idea what was about to unravel. With calm precision, I tapped send on the email from my phone, resignation letters, client transfer notifications, patent filings, legal proof of my independent development, and the press release, scheduled to publish at 9 a.m. sharp the next morning. As the sounds of email notifications began to chime like tiny alarms across the room, I turned and walked out, not even glancing back. By the time I reached the parking garage, my phone was buzzing uncontrollably. First, incoming call, CEO Cortana. I let it ring. Then, Dominic. Aleliana, HR. Ren, 6 missed calls. I ignored them all. If you're still watching, thank you for staying with me. Because this isn't just a story about office betrayal. It's about reclaiming your voice when no one else will speak for you. And what happened next? Well, that's when it got personal. As I walked toward my car, I finally checked my messages. The most revealing was from Renata. Whatever they're offering you, we'll double it. Come back inside. Let's talk. I smiled. That meant they had finally opened the files. They had seen the truth. The stolen logistics framework they credited to Ren? Proven to be a watered-down version of my original model. The innovations they shelved? Validated by 5 major clients who had already signed contingency agreements with me. The framework itself? Filed under a different intellectual category, developed off company hours, legally airtight. Their empire had been built on my silence. And now that I had spoken, it was already crumbling. I was unlocking my car when I heard rushed footsteps echoing behind me. Belle, wait. I turned to see Vincent, the company's VP, out of breath, sweat glistening at his temples, a man usually so polished, now unraveling. You can't just leave like this, he panted. The company needs you. I paused. For the first time in years, I saw the desperation on their side of the equation. Interesting, I said coolly. An hour ago, I wasn't even worth a seat at the ceremony. That was a clerical error, he said quickly, adjusting his tie. A misunderstanding. Was it also a clerical error, I asked, when my name was erased from the quarterly reports? Or when one got promoted for presenting my work? Or when I watched others get applauded using my algorithms? His jaw tightened. Business is complicated, he said carefully. Individual contributions often get absorbed into larger initiatives. I nodded slowly. Yes, I've noticed which contributions get absorbed. And whose get celebrated. Then I leaned in slightly. But that's no longer my concern. Vincent swallowed hard. The clients you've contacted are under exclusivity agreements. They can't just walk away. That's when I smiled, truly smiled for the first time that day. You might want to reread those contracts. What? The exclusivity clauses restrict them from working with competing companies using Comesta's framework, I said. But my solution was developed independently. On my time. With my team. Under a separate intellectual category. Your legal team already confirmed this, accidentally, of course, in a compliance review last quarter. Vincent's face drained of color. You tricked us. No, I said. You underestimated me. That's not the same thing. The collapse. Within an hour, the group chat exploded. Ran was removed from the award website. Dominic was summoned for an emergency audit. Clients began requesting contract terminations. At 9 a.m. sharp, the press release dropped. Former Comesta analyst launches disruptive logistics startup backed by industry veterans, secures 5 major clients. The story trended on LinkedIn within the hour. VC firms reposted it. Industry blogs covered it. People began sharing their own stories about stolen ideas, silenced voices, buried brilliance. And then, I got another message. From Mr. Cortana, the CEO. Let's talk. You've made your point. What will it take to bring you back? I didn't answer. Instead, I sent one final email. The question isn't what it would take to bring me back. It's what you're going to do to stop more people from walking out. Legacy. ArcLight Dynamics launched within 30 days. Our culture was built on radical transparency, fair attribution, and shared credit. We worked smarter, not louder. And our clients? They stayed. 6 months later, Comesta filed for reorganization. Dominic? Blacklisted. Ren? Gone quiet. Vincent? Resigned. And me? I didn't win a trophy. I didn't get applause. But I did get something better. Respect. Ownership. Power. Peace. They underestimated the quiet girl who stayed late and never played politics. They forgot that silence doesn't mean submission. They thought revenge would be loud and messy. But true revenge? It's quiet. It's lawful. It's calculated. And when it arrives, it changes everything. 6 months ago, I would have given anything for them to acknowledge my work. But as Vincent stood in front of me, desperate, offering titles, bonuses, promises, something inside me shifted forever. What do you want? He pleaded. A promotion? Equity? A named role? I looked him in the eye, my voice quiet, but certain. What I wanted was respect. Recognition for the years I gave this company. For the systems I built. For the table I helped set. I opened my car door and paused. But thank you, Vincent. You showed me something more valuable today. I don't need your table. I can build my own. Then I drove away. In my rearview mirror, I saw a rush of executives flooding into the parking garage, the awards ceremony now forgotten. Their curated reality was crumbling. My phone buzzed endlessly. I pulled over just long enough to silence it. But not before seeing a message from Tamsin. It's done. We're all out. Meeting you at the new office. The office was a converted industrial space I had leased under a shell company 3 weeks earlier, unassuming from the outside, but alive with purpose within. When I walked in, they were already there. Tamsin, Leo, Meredith, Jacob, Mila, Adrian, Keisha. 7 of the sharpest minds I'd ever worked with, all veterans of silent battles at our former employer. Each of them had handed in their resignations at the exact same moment I had. Together, we created a talent exodus that no company could recover from quickly. Did they try to stop you? Meredith asked. She had once brought in the company's most profitable accounts and was never once invited to leadership strategy meetings. Vincent chased me into the garage, I replied, half amused. Offered me everything he thought I wanted. Leo laughed, handing me a cup of coffee from the machine we had installed last weekend. Bet that felt good. Not as good as this will, I said, opening my laptop. There it was. An email from our first major client. Not only had they agreed to transfer their business to us, but they had already referred us to 2 more, both intrigued by our innovation-first model. That moment wasn't loud. No cheering. No champagne. Just a stillness in the room. A sense of something beginning, something real. For the next few hours, we finalized our launch strategy. Nexus Paradigm, our company, would announce its existence the following morning. Our proprietary logistics framework, protected under preliminary patents, would be our flagship offering. The client agreements were already signed. Revenue was real. Momentum had begun. At exactly 7:30 p.m., my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it until Tamsin glanced at the screen. That's the board chairman's private line, she said quietly. I answered and placed it on speaker. Ms. Novak, came the gravelly voice of Preston Fulton, the elusive and rarely seen chairman of Comesta's board. I believe we need to talk. I'm listening, I said evenly. I've reviewed the situation. The documents you sent are deeply concerning. I'd like to meet privately to discuss a resolution. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Fulton, I replied. But there's nothing to resolve. My decision is final. There was a pause. Then his tone changed colder. Sharper. Perhaps I haven't made myself clear. Our company has resources you cannot imagine. If you proceed with this venture, we will be forced to protect our interests. Are you threatening me? I asked. I'm outlining consequences, he replied. Legal action for breach of confidentiality. Challenges to your patents. We'll ensure your startup never gets off the ground. I glanced at Leo, who had already started recording the call. Mr. Fulton, I said calmly, everything I've built was created legally, on my personal time, with my personal resources. Your own legal department confirmed this, in writing. The framework I developed is entirely distinct from company property. As for confidentiality, I opened a separate file. I never shared internal proprietary data. My work was my own, proven by timestamps, design history, and a clean audit trail. I've been preparing for this moment for years. There was a long silence. Then he said, quietly, You've made a serious mistake. No, I replied. I made a decision. The mistake was yours when you taught me that silence wasn't loyalty, it was just leverage you hadn't lost yet. When the call ended, I looked around the room. No one cheered. No one clapped. But there was something more powerful than celebration conviction. We were no longer victims. We weren't just rebels. We were builders. Creators. A team forged in betrayal and made unstoppable by truth. The bittersweet victory. We launched the next morning. Quietly. Without a press conference or fanfare. Just a clean website. A signed client roster. And a mission. Within 2 weeks, Comesta's board announced an internal investigation. Within 2 months, they lost their largest client. And within the year, they were absorbed by a larger firm, their brand erased. But the victory was never about revenge alone. It was about creating something that couldn't be taken from us. I'd be lying if I said it didn't cost me. I lost years. Lost sleep. Lost moments with family. And there were days when I questioned whether it was all worth it. But when I see Tamsin lead strategy calls and Leo coaching the next generation of analysts, when I see Meredith finally making decisions she was once excluded from, I know this. We didn't just escape something broken. We built something better. They once told me I was just an analyst. Now they know. I was the foundation all along.